Hey, welcome back to UAP Studies Podcast. Here we are for part 4 with Joshua Pierson, who is joining us from North Carolina, right? And then
They haven't
South
kicked
Carolina.
me out yet.
Damn it. Well, not yet, but once they find out what you've been up to, they will. Coming from South Carolina is Michael Glosson, of course,
Hey, everybody.
PhD. I always brag about the PhD part. I think everybody who has a PhD should brag about it
You
all the
do.
time. You know what I mean? That's if I had a PhD, that's what I would do.
You'd do it for about a year.
Jason Gilmet, PhD. That
I
is
found my PhD after I moved. I found my PhD like 2 years later under my passenger seat in my car, like the actual document, and I didn't even know.
nuts. You spend that many years working on it,
I'll go
and
out
it
and
just means nothing. You just throw
Oh,
it
yeah,
in with
right.
the rest of your
Coffee
garbage.
stains on your PhD certificate. No,
Yeah.
it's in a frame.
It was like a McDonald's fry on top of it or something.
That might actually show genius or laziness. You know, if there's ketchup on it and just like the motor oil, but you can see it's certified. Yeah. So this is great. We've actually been about 3 weeks without recording any episodes, and every single time that I get close to an episode, like when I've been away for a little bit, I always get nervous.
You didn't introduce Katie. That's how.
Oh, oh my God. I'm so sorry, Katie. Katie Page is coming from Colorado. I am so sorry. I just jumped right into it. How are you, Katie?
I'm good.
Yeah, I love the background. Seriously, your background, you really spruced it up. Like you brought in your A game. I love it.
Thank you. Thank
You know, you mean business. I love it. I need to spruce it up back here too. I will paint the wall. It drives people crazy. Some people make comments that the wall doesn't match, and I totally get it. It will be painted. I just got to think of I got to think of a color that would look nice that, you know, because if I'm podcasting, I want a nice color in the back, but I'm very picky and I don't want to go too dark. But anyways, that's a topic for another podcast, I guess. Joshua, thank you so much for coming back for part 4. So we established over the last few episodes, you know, this sort of meticulous process that you've gone through to, I guess, siphon the right information or things that would fit what you sort of set as the bar for solid evidence, in the layman's term, as far as I understand it. And within that framework, even though you would think, well, you know, he would eliminate 99% or, you know, 98% of most of the cases being this meticulous, you still ended up with so much data on this. And of course, we'll touch up on that. But I just want to welcome you again to UAP Studies Podcast, and I'll give you the mic, good sir.
Thank you. You know, it's always a pleasure to to talk with you and your team, brother. I've enjoyed doing this over the past, you know, few weeks that we've tried to get this presentation laid on, and hopefully, you know, there's something to take away from it on the back end. You know, being an Intel background, it provides a unique perspective of how to look at these types of problems. And I hope I was able to demonstrate that there's other ways of maybe bringing together, you know, the different disciplines that are looking at this problem set and saying, hey, look, we can now approach it through different angles other than keeping it binned by discipline. Interesting. What is an interesting let's say deliverable or area of future research is I keep going back to that those 75 cases where biologics were reported. I've started doing my data collection and curation on those 75 cases as well. And you know, the point, you know, the reason why I'm doing that again is there's so much discussion about, you know, the relationship between an animated entity and these technological signatures that you know, the incomprehensible or these phenomenal experiences or these phenomenal encounters, you know, emit, but data bringing it together to determine if a relationship is present just doesn't seem to be a lot of writing focusing on the relationship between the two. At least what I've encountered thus far is it's either A, an experiencer, or B, a UAP. And then one is subjected, one is essentially given a lower priority to the other. And so what I'm looking at off of the 75 cases that, you know, where CE3 encounter was reported in my dissertation is, okay, let's see if there is a relationship. And then let's define the parameter of that relationship if we can. And, you know, one of the findings could very well be that I need more data, and that's okay. And we go back, we look at those cases where somebody reported an animated entity, and then we recurate the data, open up the data collection aperture, recurate it, and then see what comes out on the back end. And so, I've presented that concept to several people who range in their thought from, no, it's only technologically based and nothing else, to no, the experiencer piece is what is the most prevalent and matters the most. And they've all agreed that is a good way to look at the problem, to start trying to frame out what it is that, again, what are people, saying they're experiencing when they say it? Are there patterns that emerge over multiple encounters with different people that we can place through a method like this and see what comes out on the back end? So that study, again, I'm in data curation and collection, and I'm interested to see what comes out on the back end. And the way that I'm framing it is again, and I'm not married to the concept just yet, because as you're developing your concept, you don't want to turn it into a theory without having your evidence supporting something, right? If a relationship is present, and there's that UAP piece that indicates something. Another one is if there's not, it could be paranormal. And a third possibility is maybe there's a mix between those two, the paranormal and the presence of a UAP with an animated entity. But again, the point is 75 people stated that this happened. And so we're going to see what those relationships are if one emerges. And again, it's not about determining, the truth value of the source. If you don't have a lot of information to determine source credibility, you go strictly with what is available in the public. And that's what's going on. And again, the ultimate goal is to see if we can refine our databases and our interview processes to better understand what these encounters could be. So all that, stating all that, I'm going to move to my conclusions, going back to the dissertation. And so this is what was derived from the dissertation, where you go back to the first part where we talked about the research question. These were the conclusions that came off of trying to answer the research question, which was, do UAP offer a means of do they present signatures that are detectable and measurable, right? And so this is the conclusions coming off of that after the findings, right? The first one, it seems self-explanatory, but it's important to place it within the proper context, that throughout the course of my study, UAP presents signatures that are detectable and measurable. And we have that current capability now. So it's not this esoteric kind of, abstract thought that maybe it is, but not. No, it is. Something is occurring. A phenomenal experience is occurring within our space and time that we can track, measure, and develop better systems and capabilities to better understand what it is, to detect it more effectively. Number two, and this one is important, we spend a lot of time focusing our efforts on refining technical information gathering capabilities, and we often ignore this human sensor, right? We ignore the human observation component. And the problem we have in UAP is that the majority of these encounters occur through human observation. And then what happens is that the person makes an observation and it goes into a database. And then, we have a lot of these different public companies that are essentially canvassing the earth to try and separate the ash and trash, like, space debris or whatever, from something, the prosaic from the incomprehensible. Maybe we should focus on the human sensor first. And if that means that there's an architecture built where we've integrated a terrestrial-based sensor platform focused on the human, coupled with, looking outward, which is integrated with a atmospheric-based terrestrial sensor platform, and then one that goes all the way up for space-based platforms, looking outward and looking down, looking out and in, maybe we'll be able to be more proactive in our approach. Because right now, a lot of UAP research, and by its nature, it's responsive and reactive, right? How do you get in front of something that you don't know? Well, you start with what you know. if the human sensor is who's observing it, what can we put with a human to better understand what's happening in their environment, establish a baseline? If there's a technical information gathering platform that is gathering information along certain frequencies and modalities, is there a way to either add an additional sensor that is going after those modalities that are not the target of the particular platform, or B, can we grab those modalities and frequencies that are detected but not with that particular platform's objectives and analyze that, right? So we focus on what we know. And that's essentially what the second conclusion is we spend is these technical information gathering capabilities are validating what people see. So, which means now we can say, and I would argue, maybe postulates the right term, that we can say definitively that something incomprehensible is occurring in our space-time interface, and I might be using those terms incorrectly, and we can detect it. And these technical capabilities are validating what people are seeing. The third one, this was pretty profound for me. Because we often talk about, changes in appearance, changes in characteristics of the phenomenon, changes in approach, but the technical signature aspects of it are pretty similar to what was reported in the 1940s. And so what's changed? Is it the fact that it's emitting something that our technical collection means can detect, or is it its appearance? And if it's some sort of discernible characteristic, how does that relate to a person's worldview or their experience as to how they're interpreting it? But what stayed consistent is that a UAP emitted a beam in the 1940s in the same manner that a UAP emitted a beam in 2021. Right? That's significant when you understand technological development and especially when you see how quickly things move now with technological development on Earth. We went from is it a computer using vacuum tubes to now a computer that is better to send us to space than what we had in your iPhone. It didn't take that long to do that, right? So looking at number 3, that's pretty significant when you understand research development and technology growth. Number 4, these physiological responses tend to be related or offer human signature responses that are close to radiation, like some sort of exposure to radiation. It could be a burn, could be an autoimmune issue. Something happens to where the indications point to some sort of radiation exposure. Number 5 goes hand in hand with number 2, but it needs to be said. These human observations initiate most UAP reporting. So again, focus on that human sensor, focus on what we know. And when I talk to some experts in measurement and signature information gathering, one of the points that I made is, hey, our databases are not situated yet to understand what a measurement and signature parameter would be for a UAP, because we're still the human sensor is what initiates the majority of the reporting, and then we've talked about what those reports look like in previous sessions. Pithy 3 to 5 line statements that you're really trying. You are having to work hard to extrapolate what is the signature vice what is the narrative. These encounters occur both at civilian areas and national security sites. You read that, it can seem like a mouthful, kind of like it's circular reporting, because what's the separation between a civilian area and a national security site? But again, it's important that this conclusion was put in there, because if you remember in one of the findings, it was that UAP is a ubiquitous, it's a ubiquitous encounter. It occurs in many places, and the presence of it only occurring or having a majority of occurring at national security sites doesn't necessarily align with the data that went through with what came out of the curation process for this study. The signatures of UAP. We started with the 5 observables from OSAP or ATIP, depending on, which memorandum we're looking at with OSAP and ATIP. And then it opened. There tends to be the 12 signatures that are agreed upon with like, okay, this is kind of what we think a UAP is. 42 is what emerged at the end of this. 42 different means of potentially using math, and I say math because I'm not a math whiz, and other scientific processes to better refine what a UAP looks like, or what it is when we say UAP. As again, we go back to what does UAP look like? Well, it's unidentified, anomalous, and a phenomenon. I mean, what just by that definition alone, being a subjective abstraction, like you're trying to build a taxonomy of what is known. But 42 different ways and means of measuring its presence in our space and time emerged from this dissertation. And these encounters are transient. And this last point, there was some debate with my committee on it. And if you remember looking at the maps, it's really hard to tell a cluster area, especially when, you might have several reports where, Columbus, Ohio was the area it was reported. And you might have 3 or 4 there, but Columbus is a pretty big area. So when you're trying to form a cluster area, like what does that look like? When you're talking about city that has square miles to cover, right? So there's a transient nature to the phenomena. And the evidence is limited to cluster areas, and that could also be because I used a pretty stringent curation standard that eliminated a lot of what could have helped to better refine cluster areas. So when we look at a future research area, this could be one where I look to better define what a cluster area is, but then I'm opening up to single source reporting, and that's not. And getting away from good, bad, that's not an issue in potentially diluting the database. It just means that when we look at confidence statements and probability statements of accuracy of the findings and conclusions, it may reduce that a little bit. And what I'm using for those confidence statements and probability statements is of course Intelligence Community Directive 203. It's available. It's publicly available document, which helps it's the intelligence community's industry standard for how we deliver probability statements. And so, to take an area of future research, like I said before, I'm looking at UAP and biologics based off these 75 cases. They're going to get an analytical judgment at the end based on that Intelligence Community Directive 203 standard. So, and that should help for areas of future research to define where we may want to look at potentially placing assets that we have available, in the public sector. You don't see those types of analytical judgments in this dissertation because this is strictly academic and designed to add to the body of research, right? But when we start talking about, okay, how much, credibility or veracity can we put to these information data sets? Well, that's where your analytical judgments come in. And my future papers may focus more on using analytical judgments on the back end. And so when we're looking at cluster areas, you might see something like we can assess with, reasonable certainty, which is about a 40% to 60% range, that UAP are clustering in, I don't know, just throw an area out, right? Are clustering over Fayetteville, North Carolina, right? And then the data associated is, we can put moderate confidence in it based on this curation methodology, right? And that's how you start using analytical judgment statements to frame, areas where there could be potential opportunities for information collection. I want to pause there. Did that make sense to y'all? Did I explain that well?
Totally. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to move to the next slide unless you guys want to ask a quick question on this one.
My mic is
questions already.
Yeah, I do already have.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just I was going to say I am interested in this whole radiation and also the autoimmune disease, because that is something we hear a lot in the abduction phenomenon is people end up with autoimmune disease or radiation burns. I don't think it's intentional, but I think it's a byproduct of being in close proximity with these meat bags that we have anyways. But yeah, no, that was it. I'll let you continue your presentation.
So we'll move on to the next slide.
I want to ask a clarifying question on number 6. You say UAP encounters occur predominantly at both civilian areas and national security areas. Are you saying that one is more dominant than the other? Or
no, I know the term predominant means like it's like just outside of like the 50% range.
Sure.
But and that's why it sounds like circular reporting here is because it's like a 60-40 trade-off. It's really close with where these reports are coming from, right? And so when I say 60%, 40% trade-off, right? 40% could be national security sites. That's still really high when you think about it. When you talk about like by land ratio and what's occurring with the artifact, but the point here is that it's these what is occurring at national security sites and detected with those capabilities isn't only occurring at national security sites, right? So even like we all assume that these artifacts in national security, these national security locations are just blanketed with sensors, right? And that's a general assumption that we can make that some of these areas are just going to have sensors everywhere, right? The UAP events that are occurring there do not throw off the amount of UAP events occurring in the public area.
Yeah, sure. Okay, I think I got it.
Yeah, so so like people are still observing something that's still detectable through aided and unaided means in the public sector that I would say makes it, as I've looked at the data, it's like a 60-40 trade-off between where the majority of the encounters are.
So even if it's a minority that are happening at national security sites make up such a small percentage of the actual landmass of the United States that it's a pretty disproportionately high number that are still happening there, even if they're a minority of the total.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. And we also have to understand, and one of the points here is that even with national security sites, the human sensor still reported was the majority, not the predominant, the majority of initiating the report. Okay. Right. So if somebody were to look and go, oh, well, I don't know, a couple million square miles of the US is national security related, how much of that is actually filled with people? How much of that is blanketed with a sensor, right? And how much of those cases occurring at national security sites were initiated because of a sensor? It's not many. It's mostly just people.
Fascinating.
So I'm assuming by national security sites, you're mostly referring to military bases. Is that correct?
Mostly referring to military bases, but it's not something that I want to place specifically and state specifically military installations, because then again, that limits the data set.
Right. And so like in the case of Rocky Mountain Ranch here in, outside of Colorado Springs, where we have so many bases here and we're 15 miles away on the ranch, which would be a civilian site. Did you look at the civilian sites and how close in proximity they were to national security sites?
I did not.
Okay.
Because for this study, it was specifically focused on, does UAP, what we call UAP, present signatures that are detectable and measurable.
Got it.
And so that limits the approach to specifically, like as we talked about before, can we say that something happened, right? And that was, did something happen? Is essentially when you look at that research question, that would be like the family of research questions would be, did something happen? And one of those coming off is, what are the detectable signatures of it? Now we can go back and take this data set and try and derive locations off of it and then determine the relationship to a national security locations. Problem we run into is that's when you need like 6, 8, and 10-digit grids, and you're not getting that in your current data sets. And you being all encompassing, not you in particular. I want to state that, right? We don't have that in our current data sets. We have, individual was, in Rayford, North Carolina. They observed a, glowing orange sphere that zigzagged and then disappeared. Well, Rayford, North Carolina extends across all of Hope County. So it's more than like 3 to 4 miles, right? So now you're talking about an array of distance for what is defined as Rayford, North Carolina, to be a large swath of land that I can't just pinpoint on the actual town of Rayford. So that's where the difficulty comes in when we start trying to relate it to national security locations and the relation of the location to, the ranch, to your ranch, like to Rocky Mountain Ranch. Like the data set doesn't offer a way to be able to really like define what that relationship looks like.
Yeah.
It's highly speculative because we just don't have data sets focusing on, well, can you like
Distance out. Yeah.
here's a map. Where were you specifically on the map when you observed this?
Right.
Right.
So
Because
that would be like a next step we would take. Like, okay, now that we have this set of data, let's take it and expand on it. And then you're right.
yes, ma'am. That would
Okay.
be so for an area of future study, like if you're building a database, and we'll get to reported template, recommended report templates, because I have those. There's a point in there, for a 6, 8, 10-digit grid. I'm a military guy, so that's we use MGRS or a lat long. And so if they're like, I was here, and you're like, okay, well, let me look at my iPhone and whatever. And then you can take that, put that in the report. And then now you're framing the exact location where the person said they observed it.
Got
it. So, and that'll help again to determine the presence of UAP and its relationship to, the Rocky Mountain Ranch and national security location. All right, I'm gonna move on to the next slide. Okay, these are the recommendations that were made to policymakers, and I focused on specifically on the Department of Homeland Security on one, and then government is kind of a broad term, but these recommendations there's two to the two to the executive branch, and essentially 2 to the legislative branch would be the way to look at it, right? Because again, government's big. We start talking about what we need the U.S. government to do, without getting into the intricacies of the USIC should do this, or this is what. And as I was developing these, is when the UAP task force was coming on board as an entity, and I was hesitant to make recommendations about how the government should look at researching the problem. Because with the UAP task force coming out and with Aero coming out, the organizations need time to frame out how they're going to approach the problem before you start making recommendations on what can be improved or what's working well, right? That's an important piece we seem to miss when we're looking at government entities, is that you need time to evaluate if the policy works. And so right off the bat, the first one was nominate UAP to National Intelligence Priority Framework. Information on the National Intelligence Priority Framework is also publicly available for people to understand what that is. The gist of the National Intelligence Priority Framework is that all of the topics and targets of interest to the U.S. intelligence community are in that framework. It is developed by the National Security Council, approved by the President of the United States, or the Office of the President of the United States. And that is how the USIC prioritizes their information gathering and analytical efforts. ODNI has an unclassified directive on the National Intelligence Priority Framework that you can do a search, and a publicly available search, and pull that up and read it to understand the parameter of the purpose, intent, and focus of the National Intelligence Party framework. The second one, add UAP as the ninth category of classified national security information. No matter how much we try, we got to remember that there are still some reasons why government needs to maintain secrets, and we can't get away from that. As long as we want to ensure that government interests are safeguarded, information is going to be classified, even on this topic. Now, that is not a pin for supporting government efforts vice efforts to pull information out of the government with regard to this topic. That is just to state that there is still a level of necessity to maintain a certain level of secrecy to ensure that we don't compromise ourselves as a nation state, right? So that's an important balance that we need to keep in mind. But what the ninth category of classified national security information is it relates to the national disclosure policy. It is the standard for what it is that we can share with our allies. So if we're going to look at the problem as a national security problem, our allies should be involved too. So that's what that particular bullet is stating. And then government integration program, right? So instead of this asynchronous, and at times even pernicious effort, for having government and private sector to work together, integrate better, allow both organizations, government, private sector, academia, and other entities to work independently, find areas of collaboration, and then look. And again, I keep bringing this up. Look at the National Sciences Foundation, National Humanities Foundation to fund UAP related research. If anything, I hope this dissertation demonstrates that irrespective of what Dr. Condon stated in the Condon report, there is a scientific necessity to look at researching the phenomena, right? That even if at the end of it all, a national security threat does not emerge, there's still we still have a duty to understand what is in our atmosphere or in our water, or that is like science by its nature. We learned that in my 8th grade science class, right? So to state that there's no reason to research something with evidence supporting that there is, the one takeaway that I state, that I bring up with this dissertation is, I hope it demonstrates that there is a need for material scientists and our humanities and social scientists to view this problem as a legitimate scientific need to conduct inquiry. And then the last one, UAP remains a reportable item to Congress every 180 days. That's been successful. That should not go away. So even as offices change and maybe authorities change, keep in mind that it should remain reportable to Congress for 180 days. And again, we also have to understand that government is going to, I can state with some level of reasonable, probability, government is going to continue to approach the UAP problem as trying to define the risk proposition and the threat proposition. So which means by its nature, since government is designed to protect national interests and to establish, some parameters for public safety, government is not the right entity to innovate to determine what this is, right? So government has a role, detect threat, determine the risk proposition, right? The private sector should look to innovate in better refined databases to define what it is, right? Because even if government defines what it is, if the means by which it has defined UAP is classified, because classification is there to protect sources and methods, if by that nature, then it will not be released. And that's one of the issues that we keep buttressing up against is the sensor array detecting it classified because of, the fact that sensor array exists. That's a source and method. If it is, maybe a long time before we see the information. Now that, and that's without getting into the myriad of issues that have come up over the years that we all can agree are, I would say we can agree with some level of certainty that issues have arose with government's approach to this topic. But understanding that within the role of protecting national sovereignty and even individual sovereignty, any government, we need to understand that that is their role in particular. We can do the work as well, independently of dealing with the factor that is, an organization designed to detect threat. For the Department of Homeland Security, add UAP as part of their quadrennial Homeland Security review. There is an unclassified version of this document. It's very long because it covers 4 years of what the Homeland Security Department, what DHS has done to protect the homeland. But if UAP is added into it, it increases the level of seriousness behind determining the risk proposition that the phenomena may pose. And then evaluate corollaries between UAP encounters and tier 1 critical infrastructure nodes, right? You go on the DHS website and it defines what is a critical infrastructure node. What we don't have really is any data that associates UAP with these critical infrastructure areas. Now, defining critical infrastructure is still relatively new. I think it's only about 15 to 18 years old, not a little bit older, but it's still within our generation for defining what is critical infrastructure. So the data just may not be present. But if we start looking to gather information around those areas, those critical infrastructure areas, which are different than national security sites, we may gain a better understanding of what is the phenomena. And then integrate UAP reporting into DHS fusion centers. One of the results, one of the recommendations from the 9/11 Commission was the creation of fusion centers. And fusion centers are where all of your state and at times local level police reporting goes into an analytical cell, and it is fused, hence the term fusion, with national security related information that is also classified. Now, that doesn't mean that because it goes into this fusion center that the information is now classified and inaccessible. No, it has certain unclassified parameters put into it to protect law enforcement sensitive information. But what it does is it opens the aperture to start gathering data sets from cops, which when at least in my review of the data, a lot of police that reported some pretty phenomenal encounters. And so, that's a data set that we can use, and integrating it with the fusion center will open, again, better refine our information, better, provide better insight for analysis for us to define what it is and to determine risk and threat proposition. Again, as a strategic security, doctor, since that's what the degree is in, that's why my focus is on risk and threat proposition, right? Is I'm looking for ways to better understand that piece. And so if there seems to be some scientific gaps, that's why, that's my background is in that piece. And so that's why, a lot of this seems to be focused on how do we better understand if we're assuming risk that we don't know we're assuming. Okay, and so recommendations to practitioners, these are strategic security professionals. They seem pretty simplistic on its face, but when you look at the current data sets, you see that, we haven't really been doing this, right? So identify behavioral characteristics and signatures. What's the difference between the two? A signature is something that you can pick up through a technical through an aided means of observation. A behavioral characteristic is how it acts in that particular environment, right? And so there's a difference there, right? So we can look to extrapolate those type of data points and separate them out, right? And so behavioral characteristic could be, the observer aimed a rifle at the phenomena because it had a scope on it, even though the observer had no intention of firing the weapon. It still aimed a rifle at the UAP, and UAP disappeared, right? Like that's a characteristic, where we can go, okay, well, rifle equal disappearing. What can we derive from that? What other cases do we have where that occurred? We can start assessing what that behavioral characteristic looks like. Develop curation criteria. This was something throughout the data sets that there wasn't much curation put in. And again, that's not to make any statements about the effectiveness or the utility of these data sets. It's, especially being that for 80 years, essentially, we've had to just prove that something existed to get away from the stigma, so those data sets help to do that. Now we're in a position to better refine what, these databases and use a curation criteria for bringing in the information. Standard reporting process is needed. How many UAP organizations do we have trying to collect information without a standard reporting process across the board? And I know that's a big ask. There's a lot of organizations looking to collect this, but if we don't standardize it, we are going to be severely limited in how we approach the problem scientifically, right? Because they all start with phenomenal encounters, right? I'm sorry. Most of them start with phenomenal encounters. Somebody observes it. You can't recreate it in a lab. And so if report A from one organization is wholly different in their method of collection from report B, you're no longer having to determine credibility of the source. You're now arguing veracity of the information collected and the process by which it was collected. You've now rendered it effectively useless because you can never get beyond those 2 points when they're in conflict. That's why when you look at investigations that cops do or for national security crimes or they're all standard. There is a process. You adhere to the process. If you deviate from that process, issues arise, right? Now, you can be creative in the process at times, but even then, the process is what it is, and you got to stick with it because it protects the veracity of the information. Include the fundamental elements of UAP, right? We're at a point to where we can begin defining a taxonomy of the phenomena. So let's do it, right? Instead of so that way when you go in to do your interview, you're already loaded with some basic information, some fundamental understanding of how the community is trying to define UAP. If you find something that contradicts that, keep it in the interview sheet, because that could be another data point for a different definition. Right. So but go in having an understanding of, what essentially is not only the definition of UAP, but what are some basic characteristics or signatures that you're looking to collect against. Collect physical evidence. I mean, this seems like a no-brainer. Many cases. All this physical evidence is allegedly present. Nobody bothers to gather it. Or they gather it and the chain of custody is so bad that you can't, that it's deemed unusable. So collect physical evidence, build a chain of custody, and then analyze UAP occurrences to focus those efforts, right? And so again, this is part of the information gathering process. The work, the model, the work that helped to build this model is Robert Clark's intelligence analysis, a target-centric approach. Right. And so using just industry, USIC industry standards, which are published in a myriad of works, this is a simple approach to start refining data sets. And that's the takeaway here is that, if we're looking for a profound aha moment, we're not going to get it because we need to refine our data sets. So if you're a practitioner of UAP inquiry, and you're looking to focus on the human sensor, this is what I would recommend, how I would recommend going after it. And then on this slide, this is a recommended reporting process. As you see, it's essentially circular because that's what intelligence analysis is. You gather the information, it fuses into the other pile of information to give you an analytical product. And then you take that analytical product to derive your next questions that are going to drive future information gathering is essentially what this states. And I'm going to pause for y'all to take a quick look at this one. And so I'm going to start at investigator interviews and collects evidence, right? So after the observer sees an event, investigator is dispatched, right? If that's that's the model that we're going with, right? And this is devoid of integrating a technical information gathering component. I did that by choice because we still need to better establish that something occurred. And also when you're talking about resource being constrained or restrained by access to resources, you may only be able to have the resources to dispatch an investigator, and that's that, right? And then the collection capability. I mean, deploying a multimodal sensor array anywhere is expensive, and then leaving it up for a week at a time is expensive. So what does that look like when you're in environments where you don't have access to the resources it takes to go after each one of these cases? And so there's going to be a lag right now, and that's something we should accept. As we better refine this and better demonstrate that something is occurring, that lag may get shorter. And then now people are using apps that are able to detect oddities that may indicate a UAP, and then now we're able to dispatch investigators based off of that. So, but this is based on the current model that we have available, meaning that somebody puts a report into a database. So it starts with the human sensor, but there's multiple ways to frame this. But using this method, the investigator interviews and collects evidence. They write 3 reports. There's the informational report. That is only factual data. UAP was this shape, this color, this size, was this far away from me, conducted these actions, had this effect on the environment. Factual data. That's where your signatures go. The reason why this is important is because the majority of UAP reports are pithy 3 to 5 line statements that don't provide enough context to better understand the nature of the event as it occurred in their experience and in their encounter. And then also looking at some of the data sets that are out there, the report, the UAP informational report that they used, had the narrative from the interview conducted, coupled with the factual data. You put those two together, and now you're stuck trying to remove the human component to extract the factual information, so that way you can determine if what they're seeing makes sense, right? That's where the second report that the investigator would write come in, the operational report. This is the narrative of the interview. This is when you talk about the receptivity of the source. This is where you discuss if they want to remain anonymous or if they want to remain open, if they're open to recontact, if they're open to potentially having a sensor array be situated in their environment, their area, to see if there's something that can be detected. That's where that operational report comes into play, right? It describes the interaction, the receptivity, the nature of the interview, and separates your factual information, so that way you can just write about your perceptions of the interview, how they responded to the questioning, were there points of contention. That's what that report is for. And then the third one is the report of all collected evidence. This is essentially your administrative report, right? And so with this one, because I didn't want to put like the series of other reports that you could end up writing off of this. This is where you put your administrative data, how you got out there, how long it took to respond to the report, the guy making the report, how long it took to respond to the source, and then also this is your chain of custody report. So you'd have your administrative report up front, your chain of custody report in the back if there's physical evidence to be collected. That could be your pictures. It could be something you picked up off the ground that was out there. Just, whatever, whatever is there that is now part of that overall file. So, for example, if there's a radiation burn on the source's arm and they're open to you and they're receptive to you taking a medical report that they give you from the doctor, it would be cataloged in your chain of custody report, your evidence chain of custody report. And you would state, this document was received at X date at X time. It has not been altered and was approved by, the source, and you would initial, and then, that is step one. And when you surrender it, the person acknowledges taking it and signs the same thing on that chain of custody report, that it is not altered, it is, so on and so forth. So that way, when you have 9, 10, 11, 12 people handling this medical report and these pictures of UAP burns, you can't have somebody say, oh, well, that's all, that's not like, there's no way to know if that's actually real because like, I mean, how long has it been sitting? A couple years, we don't know. And we don't know who all has touched this. Well, now you do, right? And that's the point of that chain of custody report, right? And so as you see, right, like the informational report adds signatures for analysis. Operational report, it's your source database to assess credibility and reliability of your source, right? And then the report of collected evidence, right? That's your database to identify UAP effects and also to determine what signatures are available, right? And again, right, like when we look at assessing source credibility and reliability, the goal there is as you're leading through this interview with empathy, when you're writing your operational narrative, right, that you are able to give your perception on if the person believe is the wrong word, if the person attests that the encounter occurred, this will help to remove the deceptive, any deceptive element that could be out there in UAP databases. And yes, you're using your investigator to try and assess that, but that's why having a trained investigator is highly important because they can help determine, receptivity to the report. They can help determine, whether or not the person is being as truthful as they can be, or if there may be some gaps that might lead to maybe, I don't know, their personal attempt to degrade, information gathering efforts, things like that, right? And then what all this does is it helps to build that UAP profile and focus your collection effort. And then that's when you start enhancing your interview. You have your multimodal sensory that you can deploy. And then again, it just goes into a circular process to enhance those analytical efforts. Got 2 more slides left. This is in the dissertation, I gave a recommended reporting templates, right? So you go to the back, I think it's appendix B, I believe, is where you can see these. And again, it's just, it's if people want to use these, feel free to tinker with them to make them something that works. But what I'm going to say is as we start potentially manipulating the template, we got to understand that if we're going to do this right, we got to standardize across the board, and that's what's important about looking at how to use these templates is that how we want to use it is irrelevant to what we need to gather the information, right? Because that's what's important is this the best way and the best approach to gather the information from the human sensor? And then recommendations to researchers. I think we've kind of touched on this all the way through. ID those signatures across space-time or across time, location, and duration, right? As you're gathering your information, place that UAP in space and time if you can. Because if you can't, then you're using abstract data sets at that point. And now it just becomes a thought game as opposed to something that, we can have honest or good scientific inquiry, be used to better understand it. Incorporate the human sensor. Most of these data sets, right? You have the human sensor that reports something, and then that's the last you ever hear. And then typically the discussion is, well, we're not picking anything up on our technical collection mean or technical information gathering means. Well, we're starting with a known. Why don't we look there and use that human observation to act as a trigger? We don't always need an affidavit to determine if something is true, right? And sometimes even when an affidavit is present, doesn't mean that something is true, right? So let's use them use a human sensor, use human observation as a trigger. If somebody says that they're encountering these phenomenal events frequently, okay, are they open to us to having a multimodal sensor array in their environment to see if it can pick up something anomalous? Structured analytic techniques is might be a little biased in my approach with this, being it's what I used, but it offers a means of working with inaccurate, incomplete, and even at times deceptive information. So This methodology is a way that we can approach the problem set to better understand what it is, as opposed to looking at it strictly as an academic issue or a professional issue. There's a little bit of crossover in between there, right? So this methodology offers a way to potentially bridge that gap. And then UAP groups adopt an information gathering and analysis strategy. Some UAP groups should look at this. There's others who are focused and they're saying, no, we're only interested in scientific evaluation and peer review of those conducting research on the phenomena. Okay, cool. No issue with that, or others that are focused on bringing academics together to talk about the topic and to foster an environment of idea generation. Excellent. Those groups that have the resources and the capability to gather UAP information, right? Build an information gathering and analysis strategy. Build an architecture for how you're going to go after this problem. And what are you going to do to keep multiple reports occurring of what appears to be the same encounter? How are you going to keep those minimal, or how are you going to be able to rule those out? We can build a means by which to focus our efforts at going after the problem and not just stick with, what appears to be a gap between the human sensor and, platforms that are canvassing the earth. We can bring that together. And that's what an information gathering and analysis strategy would be. With that being said, this is my last slide. So 4 sessions, several hours. There we go. Questions?
Excellent.
Bravo. 4 episodes worth. Actually, yeah, we do have questions. Katie, did you want to kick off the line of questions?
I had to go. My question was, and you answered it before I could ask it. I was going to ask you if you developed kind of a form or a standard form, and MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, as a Colorado State Director for a while, and an investigator, and also did their Mars program. So I saw the reporting systems through, the decades, really. And I love what you're saying here. And a frustration I always had, it's one thing to collect reports, and I think you're correct that we need a standardized method to collect the data. This is the old official U.S. Air Force U.S. UFO form. And I would love to compare like kind of what you did to this kind of old form here. But then the question becomes, how do we get these groups, these different large groups that are collecting these reports, to share with each other and to kind of standardize across, their ways of collecting? And then, MUFON does it right, where they really do try to train their investigators across the board, so we're all kind of on the same page. But that needs to be with all the different organizations. And then we need a way to communicate with each other and do something with that data. And that's where I get frustrated with a lot of this. So I love what you're doing here, but what is your recommendations, for doing that? How do we even begin to do that?
In the USIC, just information is classified and it's need to know, right? So
Right.
At this point, in the private sector, in the public sector, you're talking about what is now proprietary, and how much emphasis is placed on protecting the data set because it's proprietary, and potentially offering a cost basis for gaining access, right? And we all look at this and we're all annoyed that you need money to make stuff happen, because it gets really old after you're like, but I think that's an important piece to it, is standardizing information collection still allows for organizations that require resources to survive to protect their data sets, but still offer incentive to sell, right? Like that's essentially what we're talking about. And because to say, hey, let's all because if MUFON has the majority of UAP cases and has analyzed those cases, they're going to be less likely off of their analytical piece to take their judgment and then have that be put to scrutiny and provide access to the data set, right? Like, so, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, could it be something like I understand the need for an organization to profit and to, withhold and to maybe survive because they need it to survive. But could there be a way in which there's certain bits of data that could be used scientifically, that could be shared across the board? And then if you want more, you pay so much a month or whatever, and you get the more in-depth report. I mean, could something like that happen?
Yeah,
That would be at least
that would be
worthwhile.
between, like, that would be done like through MOAs, like
Yeah.
memorandums of agreement on access to information, right?
Yeah.
And that's how, I don't want to say it's how we've done it in government, but like when I've had conversations with various organizations in the private sector about this exact problem,
Mhm.
right? We have a lot of UFO groups out there and a lot of different organizations that are gathering data on this and then holding on to it, right? And so that diminishes the scientific inquiry because it seems like everybody wants to have the aha moment. Like, hey, look what I found the thing, but just because you might find some off-earth material doesn't mean that what you find is only what it is, right? And so information sharing arrangements between private sector entities, memorandums of agreement, memorandums of understanding, but even then you're still limited by the relationship that's formed off of that, and so if the goal is for better scientific understanding of the problem, right, and organizations should coalesce around that. I would even say that a bunch probably need to unify at this point. And I know that I might get dinged for that, but having all these different organizations looking at it in a myriad of different ways, to use the same term again, it limits our collective capability to better understand what we're encountering. And so I would say one, unify. Maybe have 1, 2, or even 3 organizations that are all focused on the same effort, using the same information reporting standard, and they all peer review each other's papers, right? Looking at, and then like you can have that, access to that database be proprietary based on, certain defined, parameters between the 3 organizations, right? So, or 2 or whatever, unify. That's 1. 2, if you're not going to unify, memorandums of agreement. Figure out how to talk to each other and how to come up with an acceptable way to gather information and then analyze that information. The problem you're going to have in that particular instance is that you're not going to have the resources, since you're all still federated. You're not going to have the resources to truly gather, anything against a phenomenon. We're going to still be doing, we're still going to be limited to this more, foundational understanding, and we're never going to elevate our game. So the second one is memorandums of agreement. The third one is apply a cost to the database that is proprietary, because you have to, and I would say these 3 are all separate from each other. And the third one is that if you can't get memorandums of agreement to work, right, still standardize, use the same reporting collection or the same information collection standard, but make your databases accessible to, not the rich or the super rich. There are a couple papers out there that I'm highly interested in. The academic organization wants $2,000 for it. Like, come on, man. Like, you ain't you are not that special, right? Because who's going to look at your paper? Other academics, right? And so, I shouldn't need to take a mortgage payment to look at a paper that may provide some analytical insight and maybe some evidence that can be curated and cataloged to go after. So that's already an issue in and of itself, right? But make the cost affordable to your citizen scientists and your academics and your professionals. That's key. And then lastly, analytical tools are extremely important. I've talked a lot about standardizing reporting. Standardizing analytical tools that are used is also important. And that's a different topic to get into what is needed to truly approach and understand UAP in and of itself, like the nature of UAP, right? And that includes link diagrams. It includes building a taxonomy and ontology. It includes, analytical refinement within the tools that are used. And I would even say it probably includes a level of standardization of the tools used. So that way, we're all speaking the same language when it comes to understanding what it is we're looking at. So yeah, I think those are three three courses of action. I would say pick one, and if you go with course of action 3, understand that if it costs, if it's going to make me have to make a choice between buying groceries for the month or buying your report, I am never, ever going to buy your report. I will find another way to go after the information. And I would say that as citizen scientists and researchers, I think that's a key point that we need to make in this particular community, this particular field. Okay, I think, does that answer your question, Katie?
It does. It
I
does.
just want to tag on to
there's
that.
choices out there. I hope they do it.
I just want to tag on to that I love all those suggestions. And it's also possible to say, and if you're selling access to a database to researchers, it's totally fine to say, if you're an independent researcher and you want a scholarship access for very reduced costs, we have a process for that. You can apply
Yes.
and tell us who you are and what you're doing. There are ways of making good data available to people who can do something interesting with it without also, being poor or whatever. So I love it.
I agree. And thank you for adding that, because I know that I am, new to the academic space, very new. And so, but I also understand, I did technology protection for, a good portion of my career in the military, and scientists, researchers, and academics, they have to publish or perish. And I understand that, right? You need to maintain, thought generation and thought fusion, to ensure, really the survivability piece, but then also to keep the conversation going around what you've made your life's work. And nobody is stating that like there shouldn't be a cost associated. It's just, when you're a citizen scientist trying to approach this problem and you're trying to gain access to some of the works that are out there, it gets a little steep for something you do as a hobby that might become something else in the long run, but you can do something interesting with the information. I am a fan. Like, if I were to put my weight behind something, unify.
You brought up something earlier that I was sort of questioning, because you're saying about the level classifications. Obviously, Congress and the government needs to have a certain level of classification, but a mission after, let's say, 100 years of knowing something, you're already omitting it. You're not telling the public, but to then hinder the public of their own knowledge or their own pursuit of this knowledge. Is that a form, like, for me, I would deem it treason from humans, not from the government, but it's treasonous to me to assume that a person could say, look, I'm not going to tell you the technology I now have because I know something you don't, and I have access to something that you don't, and I'm going to hinder you from knowing anything about it. And I'm totally okay with them keeping secrets, but it's the lack of oversight that I have an issue with. It's the lack that Congress itself doesn't even know what these organizations are up to, because they don't have to answer to Congress, because they're subbed to private companies that don't need to answer. Like, they find loopholes and they play within them. And even if we put all of our efforts together as civilians, I still feel like they put sticks in our wheels, and they guise them as, well, we can't tell you or what. Okay, but at what point do we say there needs to be a final point where you say you need to come out with the truth? And ultimately, I still think we're far away from it, even though Congress is, getting more and more information. But all of us here know for a fact that this is just the baby steps. Like the rabbit hole is going to go quick. They're not even talking about abductions yet. They're not talking about the spiritual aspect of this phenomenon, which is there. The woo-woo magical aspect where you walk inside a 50-foot diameter craft and on the inside it's the size of a football stadium. That makes no sense. We're so far away from addressing that with them. How would you see the buildup to address all of these issues that come with the territory of UAP to Congress? Or do you have to basically go really, really easy and slow to make them catch up with what we already know in the field? I win best question.
There's like 3 questions wrapped up in there. You have a disclosure element, you have an esoteric element.
I'm so sorry. I love it when the guests get quiet. I'm like, best question.
and then you have okay, so now you're in front of Congress. What do you do, right? So let's address disclosure, because that's a topic that I get asked often. I mean, of course I would. Like, I'm a counterintelligence agent. Been in the Army 24 years. And people are like, so what are your thoughts, right? And I personally tend to not delve into the whole disclosure, narrative and piece, because I think we can do it ourselves through what a friend of mine has coined as discovery. And me and this particular person who's asked to remain anonymous still, basically said that you have 2 camps. You have your disclosure camp and your discovery camp. And there's going to be crossover between the 2, but it's important to not conflate the 2, right? So And I did, and Nick Gold has made some interesting comments about my statement at the UAP, or the SCU conference, when I said, government's going to do what government does. We can't, if we continue to try and beat against the wall that is government, it's going to take a long, long time. Now, that does not mean don't do it. It's a government of the people, represented by the people, right? Like, that's like, we consent to who's governing us. So continue to beat that drum if you think something is there, and make your tax dollars do what they should do to, assure you that, whether or not there is or isn't something there, right? So I think that's an important piece that is important to put out, that is necessary to put out there for disclosure. It has its role, right? And whether or not there is a there, right? Government through the years hasn't done much. The organizations involved, the FBI, or I'm sorry, not the FBI. Sorry, it was not the FBI. The Department of the Air Force, the CIA in some regard, and even some of the legislative staffers, not the representatives themselves, but the staffers, have not done themselves any favors to try and mitigate a stigmatic bias about whether or not there may be something present in government. So, okay, elected representatives who hire these staffers, you did it to yourselves.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you now need to figure out how to undo it.
But that's
but from that standpoint, with disclosure, right, we're at a place now to where enough of a diverse population that is highly educated or extremely smart has stated, and that's important, and that's important to put out there, is because what did government say? Like, these government entities, the Robertson panel in particular, and then the Condon report, state about UAP. It's some dunderhead in a field that sees this thing and they're nutso. That's who said it. Well, you know what? How many people are now going to Congress with advanced degrees going, you guys have been wrong for 80 years about it being some dunderhead in a field. You need to care. And you need to care because, like, me and all these other people care. And if you don't care about what the average constituent says, well, here's some angel investors that care. So like, this guy funds you. Do you care that he, and so we're at a place now to where government is in a position to listen. And we all know at the end of the day, like, I'm not going to talk ill about, politicians, but we all know how political processes work. We all know the presence of lobbyists, like we all, sit around complain about them and their role and how like things get obfuscated when you start talking about national level government. But like, we're at a point now in the disclosure space to where those conversations can be had. So continue to have them and have them often, right? And if that means that we can't talk about the more esoteric piece yet in disclosure, okay, cool. But you know who can? Discovery.
Yeah.
We can all start looking at determining if there is a relationship. And I say if, right? Like, because again, we have to make sure that we mitigate our biases as much as possible when we're doing the research method. If there is a relationship between animated entities and the signatures of UAP. And I know some of your audience may not like that that's how I'm approaching it, because these are deeply profound experiences that people go through. And that is not meant in any way to trivialize their lived experience. But what matters is that for 80 years, we've had a conversation. Actually, we haven't had a conversation. There's been a separation between the two, but we're finally at a point to where those who are more in the discovery area, which is where I place myself, that are in that discovery area, can now focus on defining that relationship, and they should do it. And so is government going to hinder that? I don't know. Deceptiveness is hard. It doesn't take much. When people say coordinated conspiracy, a coordinated conspiracy could be like you taking some notes on a paper and then getting on like 50 Twitter accounts and posting something similar across the board just because you want to troll it. And it's literally Jason sitting in his house in Canada who just thought of something, crazy and just wanted to throw some noise in the universe. And now it becomes a thing. In the book Like War, which talks about the role of social media and its influence, right? The Russians do this with college students. And who manages their propaganda is like a series of army equivalent majors who just work with these college kids. And those majors, they're given like a short, like intent, like a 1 to 2 line intent, which is like, see this social movement, go make comments about it. And then they get their, college students who are called sock puppets. That's what they're, and like we call them sock puppets, right? Because and the reason why they're called sock puppets is because it's a bunch of fake Twitter accounts. Mm-hmm. So it's a sock puppet, right? Mm-hmm. And they will get on these fake Twitter accounts and just troll us relentlessly, right? And
I bet they're really good at it too.
Yeah, and so but we think that that's a coordinated conspiracy. It ain't coordinated. It's a bunch of army officers with college kids just telling them to type stuff. Right. So it doesn't take much to create deception. So how much of that deception is, and again, right, like these are all questions, it's not a way to sway an opinion one way or the other. How much of that deception is based on some sort of government action? And how much of that deception are we doing to ourselves? Right. And I think that that's also critical for understanding. We talk about hindrances to research, right? We talk about spokes in the wheel. Are we spoken ourselves at times? Is the government spoken us?
Good point.
And so, which is why, like, the way you find out who's putting the stick in the bike spokes is better refined databases.
Well, and you bring up a good point, because in obviously the UFO community, we've all experienced it, that it's not necessarily filled with all good people. There's some people that are very much, in it for themselves. They have their own agendas, and they're not as nice as we think. What's that?
That's a very gentle way of putting it. Yeah,
I'm trying to be gentle, but it is the way that it is. It's not all the same, and I find that that's where the hindrance is that they don't think on the idea of, hey, maybe I should collaborate with people because you get more momentum. It's not just, like you mentioned, it's always wants to be the organization that gets the big one. And I don't know, there was a new one that started not too long ago. I forgot the name of it, Enigma Labs, but still they're in Enigma. We don't know what they're collecting. Who are they giving the information to? They reached out to me recently to ask me about my story. I'm not giving it to them.
Yeah.
And as part of MUFON, I understood the process of the reports and filling out good reports, the time, date. Katie's filled in thousands of them at this point. I only filled in a few. She's way much more than me. But, you get to know people within the community who has a genuine heart, who doesn't. And even meeting people in person, you're not going to get the same reactions when you're talking to them over the computer. Katie and I was like automatically had contact in the desert. I'm like, she's like, when you become instant best friends with people, you know what I mean? It's just that you get that vibe from people. And that's the thing is I think in this community, you can also get the vibes of like, that guy, he's in it for himself. He's pooping on everybody or causing fights and disagreeing with it. Like, what's the point?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Katie.
I was just going to say, and it even ties into even people that I love and admire and respect, like the late, great Dr. Leo Sprinkle. I just recently was going through the American Heritage Center archives, inventory list online, which anybody can find. He has 3 boxes that are classified for 75 more years. What is that?
75 more. It was
I'm like, for 75 years, Dr. Leo Sprinkle has 3 boxes. What's in those boxes? I got to know. And I won't know in my lifetime. And it makes me question everything. And then you add into that all these key players within ufology and how they're linked and how, it just, it gets so messy. But what I wanted to ask you, Joshua, is the jump from 12 to 42, that's a lot.
Mhm.
And is there a list out there that we can get? Like, what is the list of 42?
Oh, it's
like,
in my dissertation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I need a copy.
I listed them all out. And matter of fact, they're in the presentation.
Okay. That's probably the day I missed.
No, no problem. I appreciate the question because it also helps to gear people to where to go, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
The only thing that I am slow to part with right now is the actual curated database and reference matrix. And the reason why is because I don't have a way of putting a copyright specifically on those.
Right.
Well, no, that's wrong. I can put a copyright on the work, but I can't ensure that it's not altered when I send it out. Like when I do a PDF, I can put something in there to where if like it gets altered or shared, I can make a note of that. And so that way, and that's important, especially nowadays with everything being digital. So that way, if it ever comes back and like, well, you wrote this here, I'm like, no, here's the original version. This is change 8 by this guy. I can't do that with the Excel database, or else I would have. Again, in the spirit of trying to foster open and honest and discussions of integrity, I'd have no issue with disseminating that as well. I just don't have a way of ensuring. Again, we talk about deception.
Right.
I don't know all the players who are going to get it. And since I don't know all the players who are going to get it, and I don't know who's actually going to protect it, the only thing not available are the spreadsheets. But the list of 42 signatures in the dissertation.
Great.
And so, and I hope that for those that review the dissertation, they can see that they can replicate the methodology. And if they can't have my email address, please feel free to reach out. My incentive in this, like my vested interest is good science and good research, right? Nobody's paying for this
and shared so others can replicate it.
So please take a look at the really look at the dissertation, look at the 42 signatures. Let's have the conversation if you want, because some of them may look more like behavioral characteristics. But what is important to understand is that as I'm framing it out, when the UAP exhibits an action, it offers a means to detect that it moved or it did something. And that's what defines it as a signature, even though it seems to be more of a behavioral characteristic, because that is one of the 42 exhibited action, but it provides us more information on, trying to build a taxonomy and ontology of UAP.
The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy isn't the answer to life 42. Is that what she answers?
That's
The
what
big
it is.
computer, is
There
that?
you go. Look at that. Look at
The
that.
answer
Right
to
there,
life is
42.
42.
Yeah.
There you go.
I did not even know. Like,
You didn't know it. Yeah, exactly. I was thinking about like, why did I
Synchronicity
hear
is
42
insane.
before? And it kept popping up. I'm like, I think it has something to do with Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Michael, do you have a final question for Joshua today?
Dude, yeah, I want to know, in your view, how far can the government and the intelligence community go in taking UAP seriously and studying it and having policies about it without requiring a basic theory of what they are?
Oh man.
Because that'd be pretty unusual. Like in most cases, we don't study terrorist cells or bio threats or cell phone towers or satellite systems without a really good idea of what the hell they are and how they work and what they're used for. But we're asking the government to put a lot into studying something, but without us committing to a clear theory of what's
Mhm.
underlying all of it.
How long will it do that? I would hope,
Good question. That's a
you
good
know,
question.
that it is as long as the taxpayer cares. But you're talking to like the theme of the very problem with government looking at this, right? Like we don't, you know, and in some conversations I've had that comes up is, you know, we don't know. Like, you know, we have the definition that's developed, and that's what we go off of, and then we try to work down from that, right? So how long? You know, it depends on how long the taxpayer cares, and it depends how long the legislative branch cares, and it depends on how long it's yielding results. And when I say yielding results, I don't mean that it's finding UAP, right?
Mhm.
But that I mean that the resultant activity of, you know, the government looking at the problem is helping us to better refine, you know, the means of identifying or of determining the threat proposition and risk proposition, which is important too, right? You know, because even though there is this foreign element, which is what UAP would be, there's also this foreign adversarial element, which is also present. And you know, sensors are there for both, right? And so, you know, essentially those are the three metrics that need to be met. Do we still care? Does the legislative branch still see value in looking at the problem with the way that they're looking at it? And what is the results of the actions taken by the government to determine the risk and threat proposition, right? And if those are leading into, you know, other areas of necessity, I guess, you know, again, now we're getting into the more abstract, then you know, it could very well stick around for a while. I am not an insider, and I know somebody's gonna be like, well, just because you said that makes you an insider. Like, look, you know, I'm an operational Army guy who wrote a dissertation on the topic. And so, you know, the reason why I say that now is in 5 years, how the government approaches it through the current office could be very different. You know, because maybe there was some resultant activity that led to a change that needed to occur. You know, and we would do well to, you know, understand that maybe that's because that's a change that needed to take. Now, government can do its own favors by not, you know, coming out and adding to the stigmatic language that's already present. You know, and if government, you know, all, you know, the two branches, the legislative and the executive branch, continue to try and approach, you know, if they try to approach this as an honest broker who wants to work with the public facing entity, you know, element of UAP research, then that's going to reduce all the, you know, the noise and you know, the concerns that people have about, you know, garnering trust and you know, better lead to framing out what UAP inquiry by both government and private sector looks like in 5 years. Because it could be very different. and as long as the two entities, government and the people, find areas of collaboration and act independently of each other, because government's not going to solve all our problems. They're not. I mean, I don't think they're going to solve this one.
None in our lifetime.
I mean,
No.
we're going to solve it, right? Like, and that would be how I could see, government interest continuing.
Hmm.
And then maybe in about a month we can talk about maybe getting on another podcast to go over what that may look like in 5 years. Just do some exploratory thought on it.
That'd be a fascinating conversation. I would love to have that.
And, at the end of the day, one day we're going to find out, about the secrecy. It's one of three things. One, we decide to keep it quiet. Two, they told us to keep it quiet, or we mutually agreed to keep it quiet. But either or, it's one of those three possibilities. And I'm not quite sure that it's just us trying to keep it quiet. We might have been told to keep things quiet for whatever reason. Like you mentioned, such and such needs to happen. I mean, if they're time travelers, they know that such and such events seem to need to happen to progress the species for whatever purpose. The bigger picture, we're missing it. Obviously, we're stuck in a puzzle. We can't see all the pieces, but it's great. And, really, thank you so much for coming on and taking your time to give us this. You blessed us with many hours of very thorough sort of look at what needs to be done. But again, I'm just saying, Joshua, you're making me more pissed off at Arrow than I was before. Just because I'm like, what is one guy in his house able to complete this while going through cancer? While going through cancer, he still manages to pull this off. Meanwhile, you got Kirkpatrick going. I can't even. Don't get me started. That's for Lisa. Lisa enjoys it when I rant about things she doesn't understand. And Kirkpatrick, I tell you one thing. She's like, oh, that's nice. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us again. We are filming another episode soon with one of Katie's friends. I've forgot the gentleman's name, Katie.
Mike Cleland.
That's what it is. It's Mike Cullen, right?
Mike Cleland, yes.
Mike Cleland.
He talks about the synchronicities with owls. Look at that right over my shoulder. So in the phenomenon, really interesting work he's done.
And that's something that we have not covered on the podcast. I've heard about it. I have never looked into it, so I'm going to look into it before he shows up, of course, next week. And I wish you all a very great week, not only to the co-host, our guest, but to everybody listening out there. I hope you're doing good. Look, we got past September, no nuclear bombs yet. So let's just continue on the right path. Just keep sending love out there, and hopefully it catches on. All right, guys.
Before we go, let me do this. Let me do the disclaimer real quick one more time.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Jason, thank you for giving me the time to come on here and rap about this dissertation over the past 4 sessions. And anytime y'all want to do this again, please, hit me up and we can find stuff to talk about. I am going to do my disclaimer one more time. The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are mine and do not reflect the views or opinions of the Department of the Army, the Department of Defense, or the United States intelligence community. Before I go, I want to leave with one more thing. An individual who I'm leaving unnamed once quipped, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. I think the better way to approach that is all extraordinary evidence is ordinary evidence collected and analyzed over time. And if we focus on collecting ordinary evidence and analyzing it over time, we'll get to something extraordinary.
Are you paying attention?